Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are watching. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all joining us around the world for our session today on mobilizing action for climate change as part of the forum's Davos Agenda 2021 this week. Now, 2021 is a decisive and opportune year for economies, industries and society at large to strengthen alliances and unlock the potential to accelerate climate action globally. And China continues to play an important leadership role in this respect. It is therefore my absolute pleasure to welcome today the distinguished Minister of Ecology and Environment, Mr. Huang Ranqiu, of the People's Republic of China, to open today's discussion by sharing China's vision and commitment to accelerating climate action both nationally and globally. Minister Huang Ranqiu holds a doctorate degree in engineering and was a professor for nearly 2 decades. He took office as the Minister of Ecology and Environment of China in April 2020, having served as Vice Minister of the then Ministry of Environmental Protection of China since 2016. Minister Huang Ranqiu, a very warm welcome to Davos Agenda 2021. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am very pleased to attend this Davos Agenda Dialogue and to attend this session. Climate change is the biggest challenge facing the humanity. To pursue low carbon development is the biggest question facing all of us. In the beginning of this year, we carry out this dialogue. It is the right moment. 2 days ago, Mr. Xi Jinping, the president of China, attended the Davos Agenda. He made a special address for a shared future of the mankind, and he provided China's vision in this pandemic situation. We are all aware that we only have one planet and we only have one shared future. We need to work together because we are one community to work together to face climate change. This is the most powerful tool. China, since long time, always put a lot of attention into climate change actions. Xi Jinping said that is our own task, not forced by the others to work in this field. We need to do it very well. We have decreased the emission hugely, and non-fossil energy have already reached 15%. We have reached the in advance the target in 2020. There's a solid base for further actions. Last year in the General Assembly, in the general debate of the UN, Mr. Xi Jinping have promised before 2030, China's emission will reach the peak and to reach neutrality in 2060. And in many international meetings, including yesterday, in the special address, he reiterated our target, and we will implement it. That last year, Mr. Xi Jinping, in the climate summit, he promised in 2030, compared to 1995, the emission will decrease about 60%. And also the forest will hugely increase. We would also developed or solar power and wind power. All these measures all shows that the proactive actions taken by the Chinese government to pursue a green development to promote the shared future of the humankind. And our 14th five-year plan also include the measures that to aim to the decrease of the emissions in our five-year plan. The neutrality efforts will be our main focus in the future. And to face climate change, we are pushing forward this work and is more and more integrated into all aspects of the economy. China is still a developing country. To achieve carbon neutrality will require huge efforts. To reach the peak and further to reach neutrality will also be the future drives of our future social and economic development. How to do that? First, the short-term targets and long-term visions will be combined. We will aim to implement the actions to achieve the peak in 2030. There will be roadmaps and actions be rolled out. We'll strengthen all the efforts to, for example, to push the coal consumption to reach the peak the earliest possible. All this to aim to achieve the strategic objective of carbon neutrality in 2060. And we'll focus on the key industries and key policies. Second, in the 14th 5 years plan, we will roll out the constraints on the industries and the regions to aim to reach the peak and neutrality. There will also be specific action plans and to push forward all the work in environment protection and economic development. Third, we will accelerate the building up of the carbon market. China has already launched the market, and now 45% of CO2 emission is covered. Especially it covers the power plants. And then in the later, we will further develop this market and to have more players involved in this market and to provide more products with carbon pricing and to give it a role of leverage. And third, we will accelerate our adaptation efforts. We aim to 2035 in all fields. We all have adaptation objectives to increase resilience overall and also to share our experience with the other countries. And fifth, we will strengthen South-South cooperation. We have our already planned $1.2 billion US dollars in these corporations. We have signed 39 agreements, bilateral agreements, and we have also organized 145 trainings with more than 2,000 specialists trained. In the future, we will rolled out pilot projects and also improve our works in other fields such as training, and to further provide our help to the others. And we also provide more green public goods to other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of work to do. We need comprehensive participation of all. I have 3 suggestions. First, we need to forge a consensus. We have a shared future. Multilateralism, win-win is the only choice. The goals are common but differentiated. We all need to pursue these objectives. The protectionism is not the way. The developed countries need to make up what has not been done for the previous not attained objectives. And also they should be combined with other efforts like economic development and poverty relief. And it is urgent need. The developed countries need to act first and to roll out contract measures and to effectively support the developing countries and to aim a long-term action. And second, we need to learn from each other. All the parties, based on the principle of mutual beneficial principle, to use multilateral mechanisms and to let all parties, including private sector, non-profit organizations, to participate in these efforts to provide a huge platform to promote knowledge sharing. We are willing to work with others to achieve concrete good result for this year's COP26 and to share with the others the green, beautiful future. Thank you very much. I would wish all the success to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Hung Ran-Chiu, for those opening words and for sharing China's ambitious roadmap for tackling climate change. You've really laid the foundations, I think, for the conversation, both with the long-run vision and the short-run commitments to 2030. Allow me now to introduce our moderator for today's panel discussion on mobilizing climate action, Tian Wei, renowned host of World Insight at China Global Television Network and a good friend of the World Economic Forum. Tian Wei, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for your guidance of this session. And thank you especially to Minister Huang from China for outlining China's specific plan and action from 2021 to 2035 and eventually to 2060, and also efforts for international cooperation. Having said that, though, mobilizing action on climate change is a common task for all of us. In order to do it well, I'm so honored to be joined by a very strong panel. They are coming from different parts of Asia and Europe, and they're going to provide us with great insights. And today, after the discussion, we're also going to invite some questions coming from participants of Davos Agenda. We hope they will have some time to answer your questions. So my honor to introduce the panelists. Yuriko Koike, who is the governor of Tokyo from Japan. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Christian Momentale, who is the group CEO of Swiss Re, now based in Switzerland. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And certainly a fellow YGL, especially hello to you. And also Teresa Ribera, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Ecological Transition of Spain. What a pleasure. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Last but certainly not least, we have Hak-Cho Shin, who's the CEO of LG Chem from the Republic of Korea. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, let's jump directly into the conversation. I know all of you have a lot to share. Go to you first, Madam Deputy Prime Minister from Spain. Earlier, the Chinese side already outlined their specific agenda, action, and plan. Now, here's the term for Europe and also for your country, Spain. What are your plans, concrete steps, and actions? Share with us, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this question and for having the chance to discuss with you all. There are two ideas that Minister Huang stressed that I share very much. The first of them, thinking in terms of one community. So it is our own task being responsible of a government, company, or local community. I think that this is very important. And the other issue is how far we can reach linking values such as prosperity, inclusiveness, opportunities, cooperation with climate action. And this is what we try to do. I like this idea of going through a race to be the first ones to be more prosperous and more committed climate action. And this is what Europe tries to do when thinking about a concrete set of policies and regulation to be the first continent to become carbon neutral. So policies through a climate law that applies through all the European policies, not just the environmental ones, reach the climate neutrality and goals on adaptation, but also to be at the very heart of the recovery. I think that going through these eyes when thinking about economic prosperity is very important. So the do not harm principle. Finance and economy is very important, and we cannot add additional harm. The European Investment Bank becoming a climate bank, so to facilitate the transformation. Thinking in terms of the external dimension is also important. This is something that we all want to stress too. So the climate finance contributions, the external dimension of the European Green Deal in terms of cooperation, in terms of trade, so to be consistent to reach our goals cooperatively with other partners and countries. And this is what we also try to do in Spain. We are going through a very important set of policies and regulations to achieve the climate neutrality by 2050, but to reach very ambitious goals in terms of energy efficiency, 39% by 2030, or renewable energy to become renewable at least in 75% in the electric power sector by 2030, and fully renewable as soon as possible and before 2050. The just transition is very important. I think that the transformation cannot go if it is not linking to social values. So the just transition for workers and different little towns, but also to take care of those that feel menaced by the transformation. So the windows of opportunity to invest in those feeling vulnerable in terms of access and cost of energy, or in terms of impacts of climate change, is very important. And these are part of the things we are doing because, as the Minister Juan said, we think that it is our own responsibility for our own cities and societies. I think that this is key in a cooperative mood, but thinking on our own responsibility when taking action.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister Roberta. What some of the points you said are extremely important, how we do sustainable development, fight against climate change, while at the same time take care of the economy, and also the partnership, as you just mentioned, within the country and beyond. Thank you. Let's go next to the CEO of Swiss Re, Mr. Momentale. Of course, everybody knows this is the challenge. And so many countries, governments have already pledged carbon neutrality. They have a specific plan. What does that mean for businesses? Why sustainable development and also fight against climate change so important now for global companies?
Yeah, thank you, Tian Wei, and happy to give you a bit of a perspective around the corporate sector, because we have clients all around the world. So I see some observations. So maybe 3 points. The first one, I think many people don't realize that the companies operate in very different systems all over the world, different cultures, And we always talk about shareholder capitalism, but that's really a US-centric thinking, because in the US, there's a law which says that the board of directors has to act in the benefit of the shareholders. Very few people know that in Europe, that's not the case. Many European countries, for example, Switzerland, the law is actually that the board of directors has to act for the company, in the interest of the company. So it's a multi-stakeholder concept. But of course, Europe has been heavily influenced by the US, and so there's a different overlay here. But here, having friends from China and Japan, two societies I visit a lot, obviously they have a very different approach to that. There's more ancient philosophy behind it. There's the harmonious society concept in China, for example. And it is obvious to me that my clients who are in China and Japan, for example, when they take decisions, it's always multi-stakeholder. It's always thinking about the consequences the decisions will have on the overall society, on the employees, etc. So that's a very different starting position, not enough people are aware of. So when the CEOs of the US companies last year made a letter saying multi-stakeholder is important, we need to transition to that, it was a courageous step for them in their context. But I guess the rest of the world, the CEOs thought, welcome to the club. Right? There's nothing special about that. So second observation is the transition of consciousness of CEOs around the problem of climate change. This happened quite a while ago. When I take Davos or so, I would say maybe 15 years, very few people knew about that. But 8 to 10 years ago, I would say there was a transition of opinion. The majority of CEOs knew this is a serious challenge and we need to tackle it. But because of the different systems they're in, there was not a lot of action. The action happened in those companies where it's easy to do, like Swiss Re, it's easy to do. I could cut emissions, everything, because it's not that expensive for us. But all the industries where it's very difficult to do, if you're in steel industry, if you're in cement industry, transportation, it's very expensive to do the transition. And the CEOs didn't see a mandate. They didn't see enough, reason to do that. And they were afraid of getting out of business. So that's why, even though the transition of consciousness was there, you didn't see a lot of action. So what's different now? My third observation would be that finally the loop is closing. And certainly in the Western world, there's been a movement of shareholders. That's the decisive action. The shareholders are changing their opinion. The public opinion is shifting. Major shareholders are pension funds. Pension funds feel the pressure and start to put the pressure on companies that they have to transition to this net zero world. It started in a Nordic country in Europe, but it came down south and it went over to Canada and then to the US. And now you can see this movement about 2 years ago, it started, is very strong. Every meeting I have with shareholders, they ask me around ESG, where we are. It's becoming stronger and stronger. And so yesterday, I can say maybe accumulated in the letter of Larry Fink, who is the CEO of the biggest asset manager, as you know, in the US, to basically say the companies who don't commit to net zero 2050 will be left behind, which is, I think, a strong symbol. And I can see enormous interest now of companies, also of the steel industry, of all other industries. They know it's real, the pressure is huge. And I think there's a big need to collaborate across businesses to find solutions around that. So I really think we're in a tipping point in terms of action. And I'm happy to elaborate later, maybe a little bit more on that.
Thank you, Christian, for that. It's always wonderful to have people catching up, at least on this cause, right? The climate change, as you just mentioned, whether it's a stakeholder only and shareholders only, or it is more multiple parties participation is always welcome. But what you said is very important, from consciousness now to real action. That is the thing we want to emphasize today. Thank you so much. Having said that, though, talking about Asia, we want to go to the governor of Tokyo from Japan, Ms. Koike. I understand that your metropolitan government has been working very hard on a plan and action about green recovery toward a decarbonization. Tell us more about the details, particularly from a localities perspective, please.
Well, thank you, Wei, for introducing me. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak at the Davos Agenda. And the current president of the World Economic Forum, Mr. Børge Brende, he was my reliable counterpart when both of us served as the Minister of the Environment of Norway and Japan. So I'm delighted to participate in this meeting under the leadership of Børge, the president of the World Economic Forum. Now, in order to tackle both the COVID-19 crisis and the climate crisis, it is crucial that actions are taken not only at the national level, but cities which are on the front lines of these emergencies. For economic recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, in addition to measures to counter climate change, Tokyo is advancing a sustainable recovery. Now, the actions we take during this decade to the 2030 milestone are crucial in realizing zero-emission Tokyo, which will help achieve net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Now, we here announce that Tokyo will, by 2030, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from year 2000 levels, and increase the use of electricity generated from renewable sources to 50%. Now, in order to cut carbon emissions by half, we are calling on the people and business of Tokyo to work together with us to change our actions. We call this initiative Time to Act, Carbon Half Style. So, under this slogan, Time to Act, from consciousness to action. Under this slogan, Time to Act, we wish everyone to accelerate effective action against climate change. And in addition, green finance, which combines the environment and finance, is essential as investment into the future. So the Tokyo Metropolitan Government is advancing studies for the creation of a green finance market, and we hold a preparatory meeting with experts on February 3rd, next week. So by establishing itself as a leader in the world's green finance market, Tokyo will make sure that financial flows are redirected to ESG investing and invite investment into the future from both within and outside Japan, and of course from Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Koike. I'm so glad that we are having a panel of European and also Asian government and business leaders, because there's really a lot to compare notes about. Many are taking concrete steps, as you said, time to act. I love that slogan, by the way. Having said that, let's move on to our next speaker coming from South Korea, also in Northeast Asia. We have Mr. Shin from LG Chem, CEO of LG Chem. Good to see you, Mr. Shin. I know your company are doing two things. One is trying to work on the climate change issue from the perspective of manufacturing process within your company. The other is also to work with the government on the concrete plans and fulfilling of those plans. But, tell us more about, as business leader as you are, what are some of the most important agenda for you? How to keep the balance some of the earlier speakers already talked about. Go ahead, Mr. Shin.
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. It's my great pleasure to speak to all of you in the audience. I'm running the company by the name of LG Chem, the $30 billion petrochemical-based company. Is one of those industries that Christian mentioned as far as a hard-to-convert type industry. But I tell you our story, and then I have a couple of points to make relative to the subject. In 2019, our company, LG Chem, emitted 10.5 million tons of CO2 as a company. When we launched a CEO initiative in early 2019, the task force came back with an astonishing projection that if we keep doing what we are doing and growing at current rate without major intervention, our company will be emitting 40 million tons of CO2 by 2050. That's 4 times the current emission level. That harsh realization actually prompted us to think about the whole subject very seriously, which led up to declaration of LG Chem's 2050 carbon neutrality initiative, which was announced. Our 2050 goal calls for holding 2050 emission level at 2019 level, or a reduction of 30 million tons of CO2 annually by 2050. To put this number into perspective, 30 million tons of CO2 every year reduction is equivalent to the amount of CO2 generated by 12.5 million internal combustion engine vehicles. Or it can also be offset by planting as many as 220 million trees. So we are talking about daunting task here. We knew from the beginning that the only way to make this work is working backwards from our 2050 goalpost and actually find a way to get there. Using the right to left thinking with a clear leadership commitment and accountability attached to each milestone. Otherwise, we knew from the get-go this is not going to happen. We deployed a full range of famous avoid, reduce, and compensate tactics with specific milestones assigned by business, by geography, and by each plant site. Some of our key strategy includes, number one, practicing renewable energy 100 in all of our global manufacturing operations. And number two, significant R&D effort to commercialize breakthrough technologies, such as carbon capture and utilization, to directly reduce carbon from our petrochemical manufacturing processes. And number three, replacing fossil fuel-based raw ingredients with bio-based raw materials. So it has been a daunting task, and we are in the second-year journey now. But so far, obviously, we think we are still closer to the beginning than to the end. But I can feel after a year and a half of all-out effort that we now have a pathway. We can see the pathway to get there by 2050. You mentioned what is my friendly advice to my colleagues around the world who may be in the same shoes as me, like CEOs and business leaders around the world, is the leadership commitment at the top is the only way to make this happen. So actually, I propose a three-step recommendation that I have for all CEOs and industry leaders around the world to make this happen, and that is commit, operationalize, and engage. First, we should commit ourselves to the goal and declare that this is your personal priority as a CEO. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And then operationalize. In other words, set specific milestone and develop actionable plans to get there. Without clearly defined reduction goals and strategy and actions, the slogan alone can be quite hollow in a hurry. And then third, engage. We need to collaborate with many other stakeholders, such as public sectors, society at large, to tackle this issue together as a team. So that's what I'd like to leave with you: commit, operationalize, and engage as a working model for my colleagues in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shen. I love CEOs who are having concrete plans and certainly principles, as you just mentioned, and also being a mathematician, laying out all the numbers so that we can achieve them on time. Thank you for that. Having said that, let me move on to another round of discussion with all of you. You have already beautifully laid out the plan that you have, the principle that will lead us there. So tell us some more concrete issues as to what you're working on right now. What are some of the challenges? How are you overcoming these challenges? For example, in Tokyo, this is a huge metropolitan city. Governor Koike, I just wonder how many stakeholders you have to engage in this process in order to achieve the goals that you just said, and how many people you have to talk about time to act and time to act. Governor Koike.
Thank you. Tokyo's population, for your information, we have 14 million.
Sure.
Not big enough. Anyway, as a leading eco-friendly city and an international financial center, Tokyo is implementing various measures to find solutions to environmental and financial challenges. First, as one initiative we are taking to accelerate actions for a 50% reduction of CO2 emissions, we recently announced the banning of all sales of new gas-fueled cars in Tokyo by 2030. And Tokyo is a member of the C40. That is a group of major cities, including New York, London, Paris, and those major cities in the world dedicated to tackling climate change, of which I serve as a vice chair. And we will work with the other C40 member cities, as well as with the businesses, NGOs, and other organizations to call for climate action, a global movement against climate change. Now, regarding sustainable buildings, we have so many tall and big buildings in Tokyo, and which boast a high environmental performance based on our years of experience and expertise in this field. We will demonstrate leadership in their promotion, and this will be facilitated by ESG finance. And we are advancing initiatives that combine the environment and finance as measures to promote ESG investing. And these include issuing Tokyo green bonds. Tokyo was the first local government in Japan to issue such bonds, and creating a Tokyo ESG fund for investment in renewable energy. And as I just mentioned, we plan to make Tokyo a leading city in green finance. To do so, we will build a system to attract capital for ESG investing from within and outside Japan, and for the creation of what we tentatively call the Tokyo Green Finance Market. This is what we are tackling and challenging.
Thank you, Governor Koike. I really love the atmosphere right here in this panel, because we see a very voluntary, friendly competition is going on about the counter plans and also actions to be implemented. Then let's go to another Asian colleague coming from South Korea, CEO of LG Chem, Mr. Shin. What about your engagement of stakeholders? Every country has their own unique cultural and also business background. How are you doing that with your company in South Korea? Tell me more about it.
Right. Obviously, collaboration is the key in making this work. Public sector, industry, and society at large, and industry should also talking to industry, because some of these technologies like carbon capture utilization is so big that not one single company can perfect the technology. So we work together, maybe even with the government in terms of this commercialization of technology. But it is so obvious that industry alone cannot achieve the reduction goal. I'll give you an example. Without getting full access to renewable energy infrastructure and the policies in place to be able to directly purchase the renewable energy power from the source, it will be difficult to achieve RE 100 goal as an industry. This is where public sector and its policy come into play. As far as carbon reduction from manufacturing processes, we are still relying on some major technical breakthrough that has yet to happen. Has to do with the processing technology, such as how to capture carbon and utilize it, what's the energy equation to make it happen, and catalyst technology and all that. The magnitude of this type of technical challenge is so big that no one company can perfect this technology alone. Hence the need for essential industry partnership and collaboration. In terms of technology, it is my view that we need to unleash full muscles of innovation and modern technologies to tackle this issue. For example, we need full deployment of data science and AI technology to optimize energy consumption in all of our operation. So technology and innovation have a huge role to play here.
Absolutely.
You asked about the leadership aspect of this, how to transform the organization. Among many other things, I guess I will narrow it down to eventually CEO's personal conviction and passion around climate change. I think their passion and conviction become contagious in the organization. And we all know that once we get our people's hearts and minds then they'll be able to move the mountains. And frankly, nothing less than moving the mountains is the type of monumental task ahead of us.
Contagious has been a word we're all very sensitive about over the year 2020. However, contagious in this sense is absolutely encouraged. Absolutely. Thank you so much. We heard the Asian voices. Let's go back to the European voices. Deputy Governor, Deputy Prime Minister, would you help us to understand how your country, Spain, and together with your colleague within the European Union, preparing for COP26 in Glasgow later in November? How do you think governments now could really get their policies concrete and done? We are talking about actions. Please.
I think that, no, thank you. I think we are inspired as we were the CEO of LG, so working on a commit, operationalize and engage. Commit because I think that we have to be serious to fix the targets, to describe the strategy and the pathways. So to pay attention to anyone, but providing a good atmosphere and a good picture of things being achievable. This is very important. Otherwise, it looks impossible. Operationalize, I think this is also very important, and we've done a lot, and sometimes it's not easy. I think that fixing the framework in the legal context, but also being very serious in the policies is quite key. For instance, we are going through a huge industrial reconversion of the energy sector. That has allowed us to take some benefits. So the price of energy has been reduced almost 40% in less than 2 years, and we have closed 90% of the coal in less than 2 years, but stressing the solidarity policies and measures, so ensuring that no one feels left behind. This is also very important because it is quite an emotional shock. We need to raise public awareness and to go through this social territorial dimension with nature-based solutions and the restoration of ecosystems. And this is also to be very important in Glasgow, to make the right connections between the different elements, so to ensure that value, cost, finance get increasingly aligned. And finally, I think that engagement is very key. At the top, so the Prime Minister and the whole cabinet being engaged and going to see the reality and the policies and commitments through the glasses of climate action and the consistency with climate action and safety. And we have to be humble and listen to people, because I think that all these pathways need some flexibility. Nobody knows how to achieve the whole success without combining, correcting, or improving what we are doing. And I think that these are things that will be reflected in Glasgow. We need to be bold in terms of commitments. What about fossil fuels? What about the do not harm principle? What about the type of pressure that Christian Mummerat was stressing, but also the benefits of doing things properly? Only that could allow us to go beyond what we've got today.
Mr. Momentelli from Swiss Re, tell me more. How do you think from the private sector really rally more into the efforts, particularly leading up to Glasgow COP26? And certainly we see other conferences, for example, global conferences on biodiversity and many others addressing similar issues on green development.
Yeah, no, I'm very inspired by Mr. Shin. So let me use this framework to say what concretely can be done by CEOs all across the world who hopefully listen to us. So I think the first thing is you need to commit to net zero 2050. And as everybody has stressed, this is uncomfortable because no CEO can today say exactly how they will get there. So you need the leap of faith. You need to know you have to do it. That's the first thing. Operationalize. I think every company can do an analysis of all the projects they could do internally to reduce CO2 and to sort them by return period, by costs and benefit. And I think every company who has done that, who I know, 20 to 40% can actually be done in a shareholder-friendly way. You don't need the help of anybody. These are things you invest and you have a payback time of 3-4 years. So the beginning of this path to 2050, I think, is relatively easy. Then you have a middle part, which is not economical today, which is much harder. And then you have a final part, which is near impossible to get rid of. And for these two parts, I would ask people to engage and engage in particular. I have a particular interest. We have the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders here at the WEF. We have 80 CEOs who have all committed to 2050 and realize that for this second and third bucket, we will need to work together. So for example, the second bucket, which is difficult, there's a whole value chain problem today that many industries for whom it is extremely difficult to do it in a shareholder-friendly way actually deliver their product to some companies who create end-user products. And while it's very difficult for these companies to get to net zero, once you put these costs to the end product, it's actually not costing much more. So a pair of jeans would be $1 more if it was produced net zero. A car would be $500 more if it was produced net zero. So there's an opportunity for the companies who deliver, who create products for the end consumer to work together with upstream, with all the deliverers, with all their suppliers, to get to a more net zero world. And finally, I think also Mr. Schindler said it, for the impossible part, we will need to develop technologies to extract CO2 from the atmosphere. It can be planting forests, of course, but it could also be technologies which are not here today and which will be necessary. There's no way to get to net zero without technologies to extract CO2 from the atmosphere, and people don't talk enough about it. Our estimation is this industry has to be as big as the oil and gas industry today. That's how enormous this has to become by 2050. And there's also something where CEOs can work together to develop this.
All right. Thank you. I don't think our time is enough because everyone has a lot to share. That's a great thing. Before we go, let's have this, what they call the popcorn style. One word from everyone so that we know what we have in mind moving forward. Let's start with Deputy Prime Minister. Madam Deputy Prime Minister, please. One word.
Action.
Wonderful. I love it. Let's go to Governor Koike, the two women leaders in the panel.
One word? Okay, then time to act.
Go back to the slogan. Mr. Shin from South Korea.
Right. I have three words: commit, operationalize, and engage.
Okay. Last but not least, Mr. Momentale.
Commit net zero 2050.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure talking to you, and certainly see that not only the determination, but real actions already taking place, not just in this panel, but also in real life. Thank you so much. I want to thank our organizers as well, giving us this platform to talk about this most crucial issue. Later in the day, since we have time difference from different parts of the world, we're going to have a similar panel from North America as well about the mobilizing actions on climate change. We hope we can certainly compare notes, and this is about global cooperation. Thank you so much once again to all of you and our audience. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.